So imagine a world where you could literally get away with murder. Like, you could walk into a drugstore, buy enough arsenic to kill an entire football team, and no one would bat an eye. Welcome to the Poisoner's Handbook, 1900s Killers. It sounds like fiction, right? But 100 years ago, in the Jazz Age, this was real life. The Poisoner's Handbook, 1900s Killers isn't just a catchy title. It was the reality of living in a city where your wallpaper, your medicine, and even your holiday cocktail could kill you. We're going to dive deep into the golden age of poison, specifically looking at 1926, a year that changed everything. You're going to learn how the government, yes, the actual government, intentionally poisoned alcohol during Prohibition, killing thousands. We'll meet the Batman and Robin of forensic science who finally stopped them, and a guy named Mike Malloy who, well, he just refused to die. By the end of this, you'll never look at a chemistry set the same way again. Okay, so to understand why poisoners were running wild, we have to look at who was in charge of investigating deaths. Back in the early 1900s, New York City didn't have CSI. They had coroners. And here's the kicker. You didn't need to be a doctor to be a coroner. You didn't even need to know what a spleen looked like. You just needed to be elected. We're talking plumbers, saloon keepers, musicians. Literally, a guy who played the tuba could be the one deciding if you were murdered. It was, a bit of a mess. Actually, it was a disaster. These coroners were paid by the body. The more bodies they processed, the more money they made. So if a wealthy family wanted to hide a suicide, a quick bribe, and suddenly it's heart failure. If a gangster wanted to murder to look like an accident, a little cash, and boom, accidental fall. It was structurally designed for corruption. Science wasn't just ignored, it was basically non-existent. And the inquests, the trials to determine the cause of death, were often held in the back of saloons. I'm serious. The coroner would grab a few guys from the bar to be the jury, buy them a round of drinks, and they'd reach a verdict in between pints. It was a joke. So if you wanted to poison someone, the odds of getting caught by this system were practically zero. You were safer committing murder than jaywalking. It's honestly terrifying to think about how many murders went unsolved just because the guy in charge was a butcher by trade and wanted to get back to his shop. Before we meet the guys who fixed this mess, I gotta ask, if you lived back then and had to choose a non-medical profession to investigate your suspicious death, who would you want it to be? A magician? A bartender? Let me know in the comments. I feel like a bartender would at least know who held a grudge against you. So by 1918, the city had finally had enough. They abolished the coroner system and created the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. And the guy they hired, Dr. Charles Norris. Imagine the Monopoly guy, but like a serious scientist. He came from a massively wealthy banking family. We're talking money is no object rich. He took the job because he actually gave a damn. He wore silk suits, drove a chauffeur-driven car to crime scenes, and paid for the lab equipment out of his own pocket because the mayor hated him. But Norris was the face. He needed a brain for the chemistry. Enter Alexander Gettler. Total opposite of Norris. He was an immigrant, grew up poor in Brooklyn, obsessive, intense. This guy, he was modern forensic toxicology. Before him, there were barely any tests for poisons in human tissue. Gettler had to invent them. He'd spend days boiling body parts, livers, brains, stomachs, just to find a trace of arsenic the size of a pinhead. Gettler's life was basically a horror movie montage. To establish baselines for what was normal versus poison, he had to process thousands of bodies. He needed to know how much lead is naturally in a human brain so he could tell if a factory worker was poisoned. He literally ground up thousands of brains. It's gross, yeah, but without that baseline data, you couldn't prove anything in court. He turned the morgue into a data factory. Now we hit the 1920s. Prohibition. The government bans alcohol, and what happens? People stop drinking, right? Ha! No! They just started drinking everything else. But here is the dark turn. The Chemists' War. Industrial alcohol, stuff used for paints, solvents, fuel, was still legal. To stop bootleggers from stealing it and selling it as gin, the government required manufacturers to denature it, basically add poison to make it undrinkable. At first, they added stuff that just tasted bad, like soap or grease, but bootleggers hired chemists to distill that out, so the government escalated. In 1926, our key year here, the Treasury Department ordered the addition of deadly poisons: kerosene, gasoline, benzene, mercury, and the worst one, methyl alcohol or wood alcohol. They knew people were drinking this stuff. They knew bootleggers couldn't filter it all out. They did it anyway. Here's a quick science lesson, simplified. Regular booze is ethanol. Your body turns it into acetaldehyde and then vinegar. It's fine. Methyl alcohol is methanol. Your body tries to metabolize it the same way, but instead of vinegar, it turns into formaldehyde and formic acid. Formaldehyde is what they use to embalm dead bodies. Formic acid attacks your optic nerve. So you drink it, you get drunk, you feel fine, and then a few hours later, you go blind. Then you die. Christmas Eve, 1926. This is the moment the strategic blueprint talks about. Hospitals in New York were flooded. 60 people show up at Bellevue Hospital gasping for air, hallucinating. One guy came in screaming that Santa Claus was chasing him with a baseball bat before he collapsed and died. It wasn't Santa. It was the government's wood alcohol tearing his brain apart. Dozens died that night, hundreds that year. Charles Norris was furious. He issued a press release that basically accused the U.S. government of mass murder. He called it our national experiment in extermination. He said the government knew the poison wouldn't stop drinking, it would just kill the drinkers. It was a PR nightmare for the feds, but it proved one thing. The medical examiner wasn't just a coroner anymore. He was a check on power. All right, we need a palate cleanser. Let's talk about the Bronx, 1933. The Great Depression is hitting hard. A group of 5 guys, a speakeasy owner, an undertaker, convenient, and a few thugs decide to kill a homeless alcoholic named Mike Malloy for the insurance money. They figured, he's a drunk, he's old, let's just give him an open tab. They called it the Murder Trust. They thought it would take a day, maybe 2. So Mike Malloy starts drinking, and drinking, and drinking. He's putting away whiskey like it's water. He does this for days. He just wakes up refreshed and asks for more. The gang is losing money on the tab. So they switch him to antifreeze. Mike drinks it and asks for a refill. They tried turpentine. Nothing. Horse liniment. Nothing. They even threw in rat poison. Mike just burped and kept drinking. Here's the crazy thing. Gettler later theorized that the massive amount of regular alcohol Mike was drinking actually acted as an antidote. Remember the methanol thing? Ethanol blocks the liver from processing the other poisons, so by being perpetually drunk, Mike was accidentally immunizing himself against the poison. He was literally too drunk to die. The gang gets desperate. They serve him a sandwich, but not just any sandwich. This was rotten sardines mixed with carpet tacks and metal shavings. I'm not making this up. Carpet tacks. Mike ate the whole thing and asked for another one. At this point, the gang's probably thinking he's a demon. They drag him to a park in winter, dump him in the snow, and pour water on him to freeze him. The next day, Mike walks into the bar complaining of a wee chill. They eventually ran him over with a taxi. He survived that too. Broken bones, sure, but he was back at the bar in 3 weeks. Finally, they resorted to brute force. Gas. They hooked a hose up to his mouth and pumped him full of carbon monoxide. That finally did it. But because they were idiots and bragged about Mike the Durable, the cops heard. Gettler did the autopsy, found the gas in his blood, and the whole murder trust went to the electric chair. Ironically, Mike outlived them all. From the absurd to the tragic, let's talk about the Radium Girls. In the 20s, radium was the new miracle element. It glowed. It was in watches, clocks, even water. Young women were hired to paint watch dials. To get a fine point on the brush, they were told to lip, dip, paint. Put the brush in their mouth. They were ingesting radioactive material all day long. The companies said it was safe. The owners wore lead aprons, but the girls got nothing. Soon, their teeth started falling out. Their jaws literally crumbled. Necrosis. The company tried to say it was syphilis to shame them into silence. Disgusting. But Gettler and a guy named Harrison Martland proved it was the radium. They took the bones of a deceased girl, cleaned them, and placed them on X-ray film in a dark room. The bones took their own picture. They were so radioactive that they exposed the film without an X-ray machine. It was the smoking gun. It proved the women were radioactive. This science helped them win a landmark lawsuit, but for many, it was too late. It's a brutal reminder that safety regulations usually are written in blood. Then there was the Looney Gas building, Standard Oil. They were making a new gasoline additive, tetraethyl lead. The workers started going insane, hallucinating bugs, violent rages, jumping out of windows. They died in straitjackets, screaming in terror. The company denied everything. Gettler had to invent a test for lead in the brain from scratch. He proved the lead was fat-soluble, soaking into their nervous systems. He practically invented environmental toxicology right there. Gettler didn't just catch killers, he saved the innocent. 1926, a dock worker named Francesco Travia is caught dumping body parts into the river. Cops go to his apartment, find the rest of the body, a woman named Anna, and a bloody knife. Case closed, right? He chopped her up. But Norris shows up and notices something weird. The body parts, they're bright cherry pink. Pink skin is the classic sign of carbon monoxide poisoning. CO binds to your blood and turns it that bright red color. Gettler runs a test and confirms Anna wasn't murdered by the knife. She died from a gas leak from the stove. Travia was just drunk, woke up, thought he killed her, and panicked. He was guilty of being an idiot and dismembering a body, which is still a crime, by the way. But he wasn't a murderer. Science saved him from the electric chair. On the flip side, you have Fanny Creighton. She poisoned her brother with arsenic in 1923. Gettler testified, but the science was new. The defense sowed doubt, and she walked. She got away with it. Years later, 1935, she poisons a neighbor. This time, Gettler is ready. He's refined the Marsh test. It creates a metallic mirror of arsenic on a glass tube. He finds massive amounts in the victim. Gettler didn't just prove the new murder, he went back and proved the old one too. He showed that the benefit of the doubt era was over. Fanny Creighton went to the electric chair. It was the moment where science finally overtook the poisoner. The perfect crime wasn't possible anymore because the chemistry didn't lie. You couldn't bribe a test tube. 1926, the year of the Christmas poisonings, the year where the real Peaky Blinders era was fading into organized corporate crime. It was the pivot point. Before this, you could kill with a 10-cent bottle of rat poison and get away with it. After Norris and Gettler, you had to be a genius to beat the lab. They took a system run by corrupt plumbers and turned it into the gold standard of forensic science. We still live in the world they built. Every time you see a warning, toxic label, or hear about a forensic test in a trial, that's their legacy. They fought the government, the corporations, and the mob, armed with nothing but test tubes and a stubborn refusal to let the dead go unheard. So next time you watch a crime show, pour one out for Norris and Gettler. Just maybe check the label first. If you dug this deep dive into the chemical underworld, hit that like button. It releases dopamine, which is a chemical I do recommend. We've got more dark history coming, covering the 100-year cycle of 1926, From the real Peaky Blinders to the mysteries of Agatha Christie, you don't want to miss it. Stay safe and stay curious.